Hi everyone, welcome back to the EV Puzzle. Today I wanted to talk to you about the GoM, the guessometer, the distance to empty gauge on your Kona Electric. And what I wanted to talk about was partly the software update that Hyundai have announced, which is part of a service campaign update. So it's not a recall, it's an improvement. An improvement is the word Hyundai have used to improve the distance to empty gauge. Now, how it improves it, what it actually does, I don't know. I have asked Hyundai and they won't tell me, or they can't tell me because they don't know themselves. And this is part of the story and what I'm quite annoyed about with Hyundai, in that this is a software update to the car, which if you don't say anything to your dealer when your car's in for a service or a recall of something else, they will apply the software update without telling you, and it will just get done. If you ask what the software update does, they say it improves the distance to empty gauge. They don't tell you exactly what it will do. They don't tell you if the gauge will give you higher readings, lower readings, whether it will remove the history of your previous journeys. They don't tell you anything because they don't know. To my best guess of what I can see is happening is Hyundai Korea are not telling Hyundai UK what's in the software updates. They're not giving them any information and there's no access to do it, or they don't want to tell us. So if I was a conspiracy theorist, I would be saying that yes, they have changed the software in the background to give you less access to the kilowatt hours of the battery, because that is possible. You know, it's a 70 kilowatt hour battery and we only get use of 64.2. So what if they change the distance to empty gauge so that as you get down to 20-30 miles left, quite low, it reduces faster and you lose 5 or 10 miles? What if they do that at the top as well? They could take some of the battery away from you, but Hyundai won't tell us what they're doing or why they're doing it. So it leaves them open to have to guess what this software change does, because they will not tell you. It is absolutely crazy that it's the most important piece of data on the front of the dash. It's the thing that gives you confidence about how far you can go in your car, and they're changing it, saying they're improving it, but they won't tell you what was wrong with it, and they won't tell you what they've actually done to fix it. As an example, one customer's been told by the dealer that it changes the fluctuations that you might experience at lower states of charge in the distance to empty numbers, the range left to go on the car. Another person has been told by the dealers that it's to do with WLTP. So because Hyundai reduced the WLTP quoted range of the car, that number has had to be changed in their algorithm. Well, both sound plausible, but neither have been confirmed by Hyundai. When I've asked them directly, they are unable to tell me. When I've asked Hyundai press team, they also are unable to reply or unwilling to reply. So it's the same situation. However hard you try, we cannot find out what the distance to empty software improvement that Hyundai are putting on our cars is doing. And the latest cars that are coming through from Hyundai, they've got the software update applied already, apparently. The words overexpression were visible on the software description that I saw at the dealership when I took my car in for the recall of the charge port actuator. I refused the software update for the distance to empty improvement because I like my GoM how it is. It is accurate. It works for me. It tells me numbers that are 300 plus or 280, 290 in winter, and they are accurate for my level of driving and the efficiency that I receive. So if I'm finding it accurate and consistent, why would I want a change that I don't know what it's doing? I don't know how different it's going to be. They say it's an improvement, but who knows what else they're changing? I would much rather wait until I can find out what the software update actually does. Talking to other customers, those customers that are harder drivers, probably doing more commuting on motorways, driving faster, those people are giving me feedback saying that the distance to empty gauge, the GoM, is now giving more realistic numbers. So the number has reduced. Instead of saying 280 miles, it now says 260 miles, and they think that's realistic for their style of driving. So it is reducing. Those people that are extremely efficient, and I count myself in that sort of category, that I do see numbers on my distance to empty gauge, my GoM, of 300 plus miles, and those other people that are getting that, one in particular, Malcolm, he saw a massive reduction initially. So instead of showing 350, 360 miles, range distance to go, which some might say, you know, is excessive and unrealistic. Well, not for his style of driving. He does get the efficiency that should give 350, 360 mile range. So it was accurate for him. Now he's seeing ranges of 270, 280, 290, and the impact to people like this is that it's giving you a lack of confidence in the car. Previously, you were comfortable to do a 300-mile trip with the efficiency that you were getting. Now the car is telling you you can't do that. So the question is, why is this an improvement? Why are they telling customers that you can't do 300 miles anymore? If the reality is the car is still as efficient as it always was, and if you've still got access to the same size battery, you should be able to go the same distances. But the car with that gauge is now adding some anxiety to you, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you really do have that range or not. Not until you actually go and do it or test it yourself. Again, this is what's wrong. Hyundai, if you're watching this and listening, why should you now make customers go out and do test drives in their cars to gain confidence about what their car can or can't do range-wise, because you have now altered their perception of the range of the car? It's extremely important, the range, the distance to empty. It's, you know, one of the key features, selling features of the car. So to have messed around with that, but in a way that you are not communicating with the customer clearly and confidently, it's just wrong. You shouldn't be doing it. Hyundai UK, why are you selling a car that you don't understand how it works? Because if you do understand how it works, why aren't you telling your customers and giving them confidence with something about range? So with that in mind, I've had a good whinge about that. One of the things that you need to do is test your electric car from full to empty and appreciate how the GoM, the distance to empty gauge, changes. And there are two sides to that, aren't there? Let's say you've got a range on your car of 350 miles. It's showing a very high number, and you suddenly go out in wet, cold conditions and you drive very fast on motorways, then you're going to achieve an efficiency level much less than you must have done previously to get the high number, and you're not going to experience the same numbers. What actually happens with that distance to empty gauge? How does it reduce, and when does it reduce? I did a video, road trip number 2, uploaded that recently, and that gave an example of that. I think I had something like, oh no, do you know, I can't remember what the range said, but basically I travelled 20 miles very quickly, and the distance to empty gauge, the GoM, reduced by 42 miles. So drove 20, reduced by 40. So that shows and gives me confidence that if I'm driving less efficiently, the distance to empty gauge reduces instantaneously. So I've done that test, I have that confidence. What about the other way around? What about if you have a range on the car of 240, 250 miles, but then drive so economically that you should be able to achieve 300 plus miles? That's exactly what I've been doing. I borrowed a car from SLM Hyundai while my car was in for a, what was it? It was the charge port actuator. The charge port door was being fixed on my Kona. So I borrowed their Kona Electric, and because their range on the car was showing something like 240, 250 miles, because they drive it harder, it's doing shorter distance journeys, and it's a demonstrator. I think they were getting 3.7 miles per kilowatt hour on average, and the range was showing at 250 something off the top of my head. I'll pop the picture up. And they had charged it for me to 96%. So what I thought I would do a trip to the butcher's to buy some sausages. Unbelievably, the butcher's I wanted to go to was 100 miles away, so I drove 100 miles there to buy my sausages, 100 miles back again, but then I took some detours and added the extra third 100 on, so I drove 300 miles. So spoiler alert, yep, I did drive 300 miles in the Kona Electric. And one of the interesting things that I can tell you up front is it said it had 8 miles left to go when I finished. So if you take the 300, add the 8 and say 308 mile range, for 96% state of charge, so divide by 0.96, you get 321-ish miles. So the Kona Electric can do 320 miles, because I got an average of 5.1 miles per kilowatt hour. And there's the important thing, 5.1 miles per kilowatt hour, times 64.2 kilowatt hours of battery that's available to you comes out at 320 something miles of range. So what I experienced in my practical trip was exactly the range that you should get from the efficiency number that it gave you times the size of the battery. That gives you what the range of the actual car is. So it sort of confirms that that car did have a 64.2 kilowatt hour battery. The efficiency number that was displayed on the screen was accurate, and I actually did those miles. I could physically drive them, so it was accurate. Now the issue is, what about the GoM? What about the distance to empty gauge? Well, this car did not have that software update on it, and it was showing a range of 250. So how did it adjust, and when did it start showing me the actual range that the car would do? Now, as I just explained, when you've got a high range on the car and you drive less economically, it reduces the range instantaneously. So you drive 2 miles and it drops 4, and it keeps doing that. The more you drive inefficiently, the more the range drops. So the range showing on the car becomes the actual range capable of the car. When you're starting from a lower number but driving more efficiently, it does not add numbers to the range. So the range does not go up so that it reaches an actual number that is efficient with your driving style there and then. It keeps being inaccurate, showing a lower number than you're physically capable of achieving, and it keeps doing that until quite a low state of charge. Now, what I did on my trip, I took lots of pictures. Well, my co-pilot took lots of pictures for me of the trip gauge showing the miles per kilowatt hour, and also the GoM and the battery percent, so we could see at what points the GoM changed and reduced to a level where it is accurate. And the more I look at it and the more I analyse those numbers, the more I realise that there are multiple ways of representing the range of the car. You've got, for example, the GoM number, plus add to it the distance you've travelled. That should be the range of the car if you charge to 100%. If it's, as I was, at 96%, you then divide by 0.96, and that gives you the total range capability of the car. The second way is, as I explained, you look at the efficiency number that you're getting, the miles per kilowatt hour, and times that by 64.2, because that's the available battery that you have if you're charged to 100%, and that will give you your range. Now, in reality, that's the accurate way of finding out the range capability of your car. If you go driving 10-20 miles and you're averaging 5 miles per kilowatt hour, then 5 times 64 is 320. That's the physical range that you can get, and that's what I've proved. So that's the second way of getting it, and that seems to be the accurate way. The third way is to take the distance to empty number on its own and divide that by the state of charge. So when I set out with 250 miles or whatever it was in this demonstrator Kona Electric, divide that by 0.96, that should also be the physical capability range of the car. So there are 3 different ways to represent it. What I wanted to try and do was show the pictures of the GoM and the distance I've travelled and the efficiency over my trip, and then see those 3 different sets of numbers and how they changed, because some of them are based on low conservative numbers and will gradually become more realistic, and some of them aren't. Some of them are based just on efficiency that I'm getting instantaneously. So I want to sort of draw a graph and see how the GoM adjusts, and that's what I'm going to attempt to do next in this video, so that you don't have to drive 300 miles in your Kona Electric to see how the GoM adjusts. Anyway, so that coming up in just a moment. My point is, though, that this is how the GoM works before the distance to empty software update. So how does it work differently when you have that update applied? And I do not know, because there is no documentation and no information to say exactly how it changes and what it does differently. All we can do is learn over a period of time from other customers' experiences, because Hyundai will not tell its customers how it's actually doing this or why it's doing it. Some customers have been told those stories, as I've told you, but how can both be right? And how can both be right and yet Hyundai UK won't confirm it and won't discuss it? You know, I do find with Hyundai dealers that they're extremely nice but they tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what they think and what they believe, but they portray it in a way as if it's official information. For example, I've been told that the new Ioniq is coming with a 64 kilowatt hour battery, and it absolutely is. They've heard from official sources. They've heard from the group sales manager who met with Hyundai UK. They know exactly it is coming with a 64 kilowatt hour battery. And of course it's not. So despite them believing it and hearing it and talking about it internally, they're happy to portray that to customers. But it's not the facts, it's not the truth, because they don't have the information. And that's what I'm finding sad. Our dealers do not have enough information to tell us factually, accurately what's actually happening. They have to send off technical inquiries to Hyundai. I don't know whether that's in Korea or whether that's some sort of central head office in the UK, but they have to send off for information to get answers to questions. So it's a shame we just can't find out exactly why or what is happening with the distance to empty gauge, the GoM. So anyway, this video covers a 300-mile trip, showing you the GoM difference, and I'll do that in just a moment. Hopefully we can learn also from other customers that have had this distance to empty update performed on the car. We'll find out if it performs any differently, but at least you can use this as a reference to what to expect. I do get down to 8% when it tells you that you've got to go and charge immediately, you're running low, and then I did get turtle mode at 3% as well with 8 miles to go. And yeah, limited power, but it's nice to see that and to know what's coming and how many miles roughly that is. It gives you confidence. The fact that I've now done it, I have confidence that if I want to do that again in my own car, I know what to expect. And that's why I'm posting the video, so you can have that experience without having to go and do this 300-mile test yourselves. So anyway, here we go. This is the first image, and this is where we started. Firstly, thank you to SLM Hyundai in Norwich for lending me their Tangerine Comet Kona Electric, and also for charging it to 96%. If they hadn't have done that, I couldn't have done this trip. It would have been really awkward. As you can see from this picture, they're getting 81% economical driving, 4% dynamic, 15% normal, and that's why they're getting 242-mile range showing on the GoM. Even after the first 11 miles, we've actually gained 3 miles on the distance travelled and the GoM reading. Second picture, we've got 220-mile range left, 31 miles travelled, miles per kilowatt hour has increased, but 251 in total. We've gained 9 miles now. We're already seeing a wide gap forming between the distance that we can achieve on the efficiency we're getting at the moment versus what the GoM is indicating. And yeah, sorry, I haven't been taking pictures of the battery percent, so I can't fill in that third number just yet. That's an 80-mile difference almost so far. Okay, I've arrived at my destination, 97 miles travelled, and the distance travelled plus the GoM now shows a range of 268 miles. But that's nearly 100 miles travelled, and it's still not accurate because according to the efficiency I'm getting, I should be able to get 333 miles of range at the moment. So yeah, the GoM's not accurate after 100 miles of travelling. And there's the butchers, of course, that I travelled to. And yeah, the sausages were well worth going for, so I'm glad I did. And yeah, there's the details if you want to go there as well, in Woodall Spa. Great turkey sandwich for lunch and a nice coffee, and then I was back on my way again. And I start remembering the battery percent pictures now, so I can start filling in the third number for the range of the car. But taking the range that's left on the GoM of 171 and dividing by 0.7, the 70% left, we're only getting 244 miles of range. So again, another interesting low number. Using the GoM divided by the state of charge, we're getting the lowest value number, so we know that's not the most accurate way. But now I think we're getting to the telling part. We're at 50%, and the distance travelled plus the GoM reading has continually gone up, and the GoM divided by the state of charge has not gone up very much at all. But see here, it went to 264, but now drops down again to 246. What's all that about? It's just not very accurate dividing by the state of charge. And now we're at 48%, that's half of the state of charge that we started off with. So in theory, on this trip, we should be able to do twice what the GoM is saying at the moment. So 118, 119, we should be able to do 236. And the division here, GoM divided by state of charge, 245. That's all it thinks we can do. But the distance travelled plus the GoM
is continually going up, showing now 280, heading more towards the 300 that we're going to achieve, the 320 that's valid for the car. The same carries on. The distance plus the GoM continues to rise until it gets close to the 300-mile range we're going to complete, and the GoM divided by the state of charge, that continues to be inaccurate and very low. But the miles per kilowatt hour times the battery size, that seems spot on. It's at this point, when I've travelled 200 miles with 100-ish to go, that the distance travelled plus the GoM is starting to make sense. So after a short comfort break and taking in the very cold Sheringham, I'm back on my way again. The distance travelled plus the GoM is continuing to rise above 300, but now the GoM divided by the state of charge is starting to get to a high enough level that it becomes plausible. It's getting into the 280 range. So is the GoM number becoming more accurate, or is the state of charge percentage becoming more accurate? Has that not been accurate along the way? At this point in the drive, I'm becoming quite confident. I am definitely going to make 300 miles in the car. So I reset the accumulated information so that I can see a new miles per kilowatt hour for the journey that I'm going to have from this point onwards, and I put my foot down a bit more. And the idea is, I want to get there quickly. I don't want to take all day doing 300 miles. So yeah, taking a bit of a risk, but decide to go for it. So as I'm now going quicker, we're obviously going to see less range indicated, but it's not changing that dramatically. It's not changing very quickly, so it's showing a nice consistent 300 plus range, distance travelled and GoM. And even the GoM divided by state of charge, it's holding quite well for the moment. Okay, so now we're getting down to the sharp end, 11% left, and the distance plus the GoM and the GoM divided by the state of charge and the miles per kilowatt hour times the battery size, they're all showing 300 plus. So they're all looking accurate. The GoM now at 30 miles and below is quite believable and accurate. And now with only single digit state of charge left, I start to slow down again, wondering whether I'm going to make it or not. So yeah, 1 minute I'm confident, the next I'm not. So as I hit 8% and 23 miles to go, we get the low EV battery warning. Visit the nearest charging station. So it sort of gives you a little bit of a panic, and then you look at the miles and think, is that real? Yes, 23 miles is accurate. That should be okay. So unless I change my driving style and drive quicker, which you're not really going to do at these low percentages, everything is going to be all right. And even as we hit 5% and then 4%, I'm not panicking. 4 and 5% seem like small numbers, but it's of a bigger battery, so there are quite a few kilowatt hours of energy left to propel you. 15 miles is quite a way, and so long as I know I've only got a few more miles to go, I'm not going to be worried about it at all. It's only at this stage when I hit 3% and then it comes down to 8 miles that I start to think, yeah, will it make it, won't it? Is this 8 and 9 mile left? Is it accurate? Will I really do the last mile that I need to? Because it re-pings up the low battery warning and gives me the turtle. So yeah, the little orange turtle appears and it does limit power. There's a little bit of a thump, a little bit of a kick as it reduced the power. So you must certainly know it's going to happen. There's no argument about it, and it is dog slow. You just put your foot down and there is nothing there whatsoever. I didn't test it to see how fast you can actually go in turtle mode, but it is just slow. There's hardly any acceleration. It creeps up. It just keeps you reminded that you're not going to be going very quick whatsoever. So what have I learned from that? Well, I've learned you can drive 100, 200 miles and the GoM's still not accurate, but it is seemingly quite accurate when you add the distance travelled plus the GoM once you get to within 100 miles to go. The GoM itself does become accurate from 30 miles and below, and you can trust the 8% and the 3%, even with turtle mode, you can trust it. I wouldn't go to the very last mile, I'm not sure what's going to happen with that, but within a few miles, I was comfortable to do that. And as I arrived back at the dealership, I saw that the Type 2 cable from the Kona was still in the pod point charger. It wasn't in the car. So a good job I didn't need to stop for a 7 kilowatt charge anywhere. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I hope that was of interest to at least a few people. And until next time, see you again soon. Bye-bye.